back in 2020, we didn't have photo ID law in Georgia for absentee ballots. So we had 1.3 million people vote absentee. So the way that you get an absentee ballot is you would sign your name to a ballot request form, send it in, they'd send you a ballot. They're supposed to check the signatures. Well, we know essentially that they didn't check the signatures because myself and a number of friends botched our signatures, had kids sign signatures, do all that, send our ballots in, ballot request forms in, and in every case, we got a ballot back. So, yes, we do have essentially Republican governor, secretary of state, General Assembly. We've moved the needle a good bit. We did move on voter ID, and we have passed some good things, but there has been really no interest in looking at what happened in 2020, looking at the fact pattern of 2020 objectively from some of the highest people in the state. And frankly, just to name him, one of those is the secretary of state.
So the gentleman that you see, that you just heard on the screen, his name is Greg Dolezal. He is a senator, a state senator here in the great state of Georgia. And he was discussing some of the shenanigans that were going on during the 2020 election. As we know, there has been a raid a couple of weeks ago on the Fulton County Elections Warehouse at the behest of the FBI. There was a warrant issued and they seized, I can't even tell you how many boxes. Some people are saying it was 700. Some are saying it was 500. Irrespective of how many it was hundreds of boxes of ballots and election-related material. And the plot has stayed. And those of us that actually know what happened, this is not surprising to us as far as the stuff that was going on during 2020. But the fact that Donald Trump and his FBI and everybody involved in that operation have actually moved to seize those ballots is a game changer, because we've been screaming from the rooftops that a lot was going on that shouldn't have been going on. And even though 2020 can't be changed, we need to get to the bottom of it, and we need to hopefully bring people to justice.
Well, we learned that she's an unhinged lunatic, first and foremost. And if you saw any of that testimony, it was 4 hours. I conducted the questioning, and she unhinged is the only adjective that I can use to describe her. But here's what we learned, Rick, specifically. We learned that on the day that Jack Smith was appointed by Biden to go after Trump, that Nathan Wade, who was the special prosecutor that Willis hired, that she had a personal relationship with, that he was on the phone that day, according to his billing records, for 8 hours with the White House. We know that he made a trip to D.C. He magically can't remember who he met with in his White House deposition. Willis has no idea who they met with allegedly in D.C. There's massive cases of amnesia now here in Atlanta, but what we do know is there was some level of J6 coordination with Willis, and we know that there was some sort of White House coordination. And I can break the news on your show tonight, Rick, that we issued subpoenas today from the Georgia State Senate to subpoena Nathan Wade and Jeff DeSantis, who is the deputy district attorney working under Fani Willis. And they have been ordered to appear a week from Friday before the state Senate to testify under oath.
Now that, of course, was Mr. Dolezal again speaking about Fani Willis. For those of y'all that are aware, Fani Willis is the district attorney for Fulton County, Georgia, which is the biggest county in the state by population. Fulton County is notoriously corrupt. There's always issues with Fulton County, from the jail to the election system they have there. The crime is out of control. It's so many things we can talk about when it comes to Fulton County. But just sticking to what we're talking about in this video, as you heard Mr. Dolezal say, her and Nathan Wade are going to have to testify before a Senate panel in the next week or so, because her story and Mr. Wade's story were not adding up regarding the handling of the 2020 election. For those of y'all that are not so keen on what's going on with these two, Nathan Wade, the guy on your right, he was hired by Fani Willis, and she paid him almost $700,000 of Fulton County taxpayer money to serve as the assistant prosecutor for the case against Trump that actually went nowhere back in 2024. And unfortunately, the taxpayer is on the hook for that, just absolutely ridiculous lawsuit that eventually got dismissed because Fani Willis got disqualified. And what's so infuriating about all this is that we have a Republican governor. We have a Republican Secretary of State who's supposed to be in charge of our elections. We have a Republican Attorney General. And all three of them did nothing to help ameliorate what was actually happening during the 2020 election, right? And of course, those of us that actually know the truth, we know the truth, we know what actually happened. It's sad, and it's a pity and a shame that all this is going on now, roughly 5, not quite 6 years later, because it won't be 6 years until the fall, but well over 5 years later, all this stuff is in motion when it could have been done from the governor if he just had the balls to do it.
I want to remind everyone what happened yesterday as it relates to the actual fact pattern of law. And a warrant was issued by a magistrate judge based on probable cause after evidence was submitted. Not a Trump-appointed judge, a magistrate judge. That is the way that the law enforcement process works in America. But we have heard repeatedly that everything was perfect with 2020. In fact, I think we probably at this point could trademark the most secure election in American history. What qualifications we use to measure that, I have no idea. But let's go back to what actually happened in 2020 if we're going to have the conversation. Drop boxes invented out of thin air, nowhere in Georgia law. Mobile voting units moving through Fulton County to 80% Democrat precincts, 81% Democrat precincts to be precise. Nowhere envisioned in Georgia law. 6.8 million absentee ballot request forms with a first-class stamp sent to every registered voter in the state of Georgia. Nowhere envisioned in Georgia law.
And notice how Mr. Dolezal keeps on saying Georgia law, Georgia law. And we know who the chief executive is for the state of Georgia, our governor, Mr. Kemp, right? We have a rhino problem in the state of Georgia. Everybody knows it. There's no way that Georgia, being a red state, governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, all red. Republican House, Republican Senate. We do have 2 U.S. senators that are Democrat, which is a direct result of this election because they had to go to a runoff. That's another conversation for another video. But Mr. Dolezal is 100% correct. Fulton County had all kind of drop boxes, and it wasn't just Fulton County, it was drop boxes all over the state. All this stuff was put in place because of COVID, right? And then, of course, the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, mailed out millions of absentee ballot request forms to people who didn't even actually request them. COVID was a big catalyst for all this stuff happening. And for those of y'all that don't know, Greg Dolezal is running for lieutenant governor if you live here in Georgia. He has my vote 100%. He's actually doing something that should have been done a long time ago, but he's virtually powerless to do something as a senator by himself. The only way we could have had a special session to get to the bottom of what was going on is if you had, I think, I can't remember what the number was, but you had to have a majority of state senators. The Senate could have called the special session, or the governor could call the special session, but you didn't have enough senators on board, and you didn't have the governor on board to actually do that. I'll look it up and see what you had to have for the Senate. But neither body or neither political entity had the balls to call that special session shortly after the 2020 election to get to the bottom of what happened.
If you count the same ballots 3 times, in theory, you should get numbers that match. But that didn't happen either. Let's talk about the recount that happened. 3,930 double scan ballots in Fulton County alone. Thousands of those have been confirmed by the state election board. Governor Kemp actually raised the concerns of the Moncla-Rossi report, and we now know that there were double scanned ballots. But even after the ballots were double scanned in Fulton County, did the numbers match on the second recount? Nope. They were still off by 850 ballots. Not one person here can answer the question of how that happened. And that is a legitimate question. We know that ballot images were deleted. We know that test ballots were included in the recount process, and we have that confirmed. But I want to take just a minute and talk about what the Democrats did in response to legitimate questions over the 2020 election. A former constituent of mine, Derek Somerville, former FBI agent, ran data analysis along with another gentleman named Mark Davis. And remember the 6.8 million absentee ballot request forms that were sent out? They had a first-class stamp. So that means if you filed the national change of address form, that was automatically forwarded to your new address. And they identified reasonable cause to question the validity of 39,141 of those ballots that were cast. They knew that 160 people had been registered to vote from a single UPS store. 2,138 people had been registered to vote from one church in Fulton County. 1,391 had been registered to vote from a shuttered 1,000 square foot building in Fulton County. Lest you think Fulton County has cleaned up their voter rolls, today, thousands of people are registered to vote in Fulton County at UPS stores, storage units, pack mails, homeless shelters that haven't been open for over 5 years. The Fulton County voter rolls have been and continue to be a mess. But when Derek Somerville and Mark Davis followed the law and filed objections to those voters, what did the Democrats do? Well, Stacey Abrams sued them in federal court, and they won. Not Stacey Abrams, but Somerville and Davis won. Judge Jones, not a Republican judge, ruled in their favor. What have we learned since then about those 39,000 voters? 12,000 of them have been removed from the voter rolls because Somerville and Davis were correct that they were no longer eligible to vote. 9,500 have updated their address to a new address outside of Fulton County, proving once again that Somerville and Davis were correct and those people were ineligible to vote. Ultimately, 84% of the votes of the eligibility that Somerville and Davis challenged were proven to have been invalid voters in the 2020 election. So let's stop this charade of the most perfect, most secure election in history. But more importantly, and I would agree with my colleagues on this, let's look forward to the future elections, and it's darn near past time for Fulton County to clean up their voter rolls.
All right, so that was Mr. Dolezal finishing up his testimony regarding what he has uncovered when it comes to the Fulton County voter rolls and so many people still being registered to vote at certain addresses that aren't even open anymore. Businesses that have closed down. He said something about a homeless shelter, UPS, and he actually went to multiple locations across Fulton County to prove that these places actually do exist and that it makes no sense for all these voters to still be registered to vote at these places. Not saying that all the people that are on the voter rolls, participated in voter fraud, but it just makes things more difficult, and it looks bad on it just looks bad on the surface when you have all these people on the voter rolls that should have been purged from the voter rolls years and years ago. Like I said, people that no longer live in the county, they might have moved to another county, might have moved to a whole other state. If you don't even live in the state of Georgia no more, you shouldn't be able to. Your name shouldn't be appearing on any ballots. There shouldn't be any ballots mailed to that address at all. It's just crazy what happened in 2020. And if you like my analysis and you like my content, how I'm talking about this situation, make sure you punch that subscribe button, leave me a comment, all that good stuff. Look at these addresses that Greg Dolezal went to.
All right, y'all. Yesterday, I made a serious allegation on the floor of the Georgia State Senate that Fulton County's voter rolls have been, and continue to be a complete mess. And today we're going to bring you the receipts. Currently, in the state of Georgia, it is illegal to be registered to vote from anywhere other than your primary residence. Can't register to vote at UPS stores, can't register to vote at homeless shelters, can't register to vote under an overpass. But today, and this is as of the January 5th Fulton County voter rolls, about 70 people are registered to vote right here. We're going to bring you a couple more locations to show you that this is not an anomaly. Fulton County has got to get their act together. All right, y'all, this is 850 Oak Street in Fulton County. and there are 19 people registered to vote at this abandoned house. And so again, this is on the Fulton County Registrar. They've got to clean up their voting rolls. This is not a new problem. And remember, back in 2020, absentee ballot request forms were sent to every single registered voter, including at locations just like this. All right, so we are at 1445 Woodmont Lane, physicaladdress.com, 138 people registered to vote. But I've got a treat for you. This is Jason Frazier. Jason, come on in the frame here. Jason
Hello.
is the guy that's done all of the heavy lifting on this. He and David Kate are the two folks that brought this to my attention. Jason, how hard was it to figure out that you had thousands of people in Fulton County registered to vote from illegal voting locations?
You know, it's not that difficult. The hardest part is getting a copy of the voter rolls. I mean, not everybody wants to spend $485 for the statewide voter roll, but essentially once you get it, just sort it based on number of people at one address. And this one jumped real far out of the page because there's 138 people registered to vote here. And when we turn the camera, you'll see it's just it looks like it used to be a house, but now it's a commercial virtual mailbox. So I can't fathom there's 138 beds in that house, so they can't be registered to vote there.
Do you see how preposterous this is? You have dozens of people registered to vote at these addresses that are no longer houses, or they're abandoned houses, etc., etc. And the Secretary of State sends, millions of absentee ballot request forms across the whole state, including to these defunct addresses. So who's keeping track of who's picking these absentee ballot request forms up? And they send the Secretary of State sends the absentee ballots back out. You don't have to show ID, and this is back in 2020 before they cleaned things up. And you had over 1 million people vote absentee. I think the number was actually like 1.3. And you literally have tens of thousands of votes coming in after the election, when we wonder how things turn out the way that they did.
Here's the thing, Jason, that's really compelling to me. The county has every piece of zoning information. They know this is a commercial location. They obviously can do easy database sorting and searching. You also, though, have identified 1,000 people that were born in the year 1900 that are on the Fulton County voter rolls. You've identified a couple hundred other people that very much seem to be the same person, same name, same address. I'm sorry, same date of birth.
Yeah.
And tell us about some of that.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of folks across Georgia who show 1800 or 1900 as their date of birth, which means what I've heard is that means they don't know their date of birth. If Fulton County or anywhere in the state, they don't know your date of birth, how can they be checking to see if you're a legal resident? And a lot of these, we were talking about the duplicates, they'll have two people registered to the same address with the same year of birth in slight variations of their name. So maybe it's Bob and Robert, maybe it's Bob and Bob. And it's clearly the same person at that address. But if you've got typos in somebody's name and you don't know their date of birth, how in the world do we know they're a U.S. citizen? And that just needs to be cleaned up so we can verify everything.
And here's the last thing I'd like to say. The fact that people like Jason and David and, a number of other people, from Derek Somerville to Mark Davis to Philip Davis, have had to do this kind of work on their own is frankly absurd. The Fulton County Registrar, this is their job. They are the ones that are supposed to keep the voter rolls clean. And like I've said before, and Fonnie Willis got mad when I said it, it's always Fulton County. And Fulton County has got to get their act cleaned up. Jason, thank you for the work that you guys have done. Super, super grateful.
Thank you.
I'm going to head to the next location. And I think we're heading next to maybe a homeless shelter. But ironically, there's a homeless shelter across the street from the Capitol with 1,900 people.
Yeah, they've had as many as 2,300, 2,400 is most I've seen. And I mean, you can go right on their website. They don't have that many beds. This is the problem.
All right, this is 477 Peachtree Street. There's 70 people registered to vote here. It's a homeless shelter that closed in 2017. All right, y'all, here we are, 2625 Piedmont, another UPS store, 96 registered voters right here in direct violation of Georgia law. Not hard to find for us, apparently pretty hard to find for Fulton County.
All right, so that is the end of the video. I just wanted to play that last clip of Senator Dolezal. I really hope that he wins the nomination for lieutenant governor. There are several other people running for the Republican nomination. I think he would make a great lieutenant governor. He's very intelligent. well spoken, and he's not afraid to go out there and do the work. It just infuriates you to know that what's most infuriating about this is that we have the power to do something about it. Federal law trumps state law, and state law trumps local law. And we live in a so-called Republican-controlled state, but these big blue counties like Fulton County, Georgia, get to, ignore the rules that are clearly spelled out by state law. And the governor does nothing. He has done nothing, all because he doesn't like Trump. That's what this is all about. Governor Kemp does not like Donald Trump. And Governor Kemp allowed what happened in Fulton County and a couple of other counties across the metro. DeKalb is another one, but we ain't going to talk about DeKalb today. But Fulton County is always the most unorganized, the most purposely incompetent. They're not cleaning up the voter rolls on purpose. They're not cleaning up the fraud. They're not cleaning up the shenanigans on purpose, because this is what the Democrats do. And to close out, none of this would have happened if our so-called Republican leadership wouldn't have allowed it to happen. Now make sure I hit that like, subscribe, comment for more. I'll catch up on the next video. Peace.